Christopher Lynn Sanders was a 40-year-old from Cason, Texas. He had 2 children and loved to fish. On the morning of August 13th, 2017, in Monahans, Texas, someone saw Chris walk away from his trailer, jump a fence, head east on I-20, and disappear in the distance. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. We as humans are constantly putting up barriers around ourselves. The literal, we don't want our neighbors looking into our backyard. Farmers don't want their cattle to escape. And a country's sovereignty is based on its ability to keep people out. Of course, in contrast, the East Germans built a wall to keep its own people in. We also have the figurative, to protect us from rejection, to help us from being hurt, to keep our own egos from being bruised, and, frankly, to keep us from trying new things or new thoughts. Delineating between mine and yours, ours and yours, his and hers, this all helps us to define who we are, both physically and mentally, what I'm personally responsible for, and what is somebody else's business and not my own. Boundaries matter. Well, in the case of Christopher Sanders, he had overcome some barriers and walls in his life. A father who wasn't involved in his upbringing, a drug addiction that controlled him for 15 years, and a bipolar condition that was defeated with medication. Then Chris disappeared. And we're left to figure out what happened after he once again, but literally this time, went over the fence. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's website, charleyproject.org. Chris Sanders was a good old boy. How do I know? His nickname was Dog, with 2 G's. He was the oldest of 5, paving the way for his siblings. But Chris didn't finish high school, but went back and got his GED later. He ended up becoming a truck driver, traveling all over the United States. During that time, Chris had 2 children with his girlfriend, a daughter in 2000, a boy in 2002. He got custody of his daughter when the couple split. Then in 2011, Chris ended up meeting his future wife, Angela. By the time he met her, Chris had kicked a drug habit. However, he still possessed a bipolar condition that got fixed with medication in 2015. Yet things still weren't totally smooth in his life. Chris and Angela constantly fought, and he told his family he planned to divorce his wife once his daughter was out of high school. But during the summer of 2017, Chris was stationed in Monahans, Texas, 7 hours from home, working for an oil drilling company. And he recently bought a trailer that he could live in at an RV park where other employees resided. So on the morning of August 13th, 2017, an employee of another company who was also living in the park noticed Chris outside. Chris walked several times back and forth between his truck and his trailer. After a few minutes, and seemingly frustrated, Chris walked away from his vehicle, leaving the driver's door open. Within seconds, the truck's alarm started going off. However, Chris kept walking, not pausing to shut it off. He went over the perimeter fence, onto the frontage road, then across the grass to the berm of Interstate 20. This person then watched as Chris started walking eastbound until he was out of sight. Eventually, Chris's cousin, who also worked for the company, came over and disconnected the alarm. He also called Chris at 11:50 a.m., over 2 hours after Chris walked off. Chris answered, saying he just needed to get his head straight and that he was still walking. The phone was shut off the next time the cousin tried calling back. Chris was never heard from or seen again. Given Chris's prior addiction, his more recent struggle with bipolar issues, and the deterioration of his marriage, his disappearance lends itself to many different theories and interpretations. And these are just 3 of many questions concerning this case. Number 1. Why would Chris walk away from his truck, leaving the door open and the alarm blaring? Number 2. Would Chris really still be walking, as he said he was when called, over 2 hours after leaving the trailer park? And number 3. What are we to make of records that show Chris's wife was in the area of Monahans both before and after the disappearance date, but not on that Sunday? Chris's family realizes he struggled with issues in his life, but they reject the idea he would have voluntarily left his life or committed suicide. The guest for this episode is Chris's mother, Sandy Sanders. Unfound news. I announced this past week on Facebook that my assistant Heather is now going to be in charge of all t-shirts. She has designed some new ones, and I love them. It's a natural fit for her since Heather already has a business in which she designs signs, pictures, and clothing. In fact, you've seen her work already. Heather made the Unfound sign that can be seen during the live show. Next, the Unfound podcast channel on YouTube is now monetized. Yes, finally. The big obstacle was the old music I used to use for the program. It was copywritten, thus making any Unfound video ineligible for monetization. Well, Natasha has been doing the dirty work of replacing old music with new music on the videos. And now the work is mostly done. Thank you, Natasha. This means we can do some super chats for the live show, along with starting to think about really marketing the channel now that everything is legal. Finally, next Friday, update episode number 5. Unfound is the only, well, I should say was the only podcast doing this. Now others are copying us. We believe it's important to do these updates because you, the public, deserve to know how these cases are progressing. Once again, next Friday. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, Deezer, and Facebook. On Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us on the Unfound podcast channel on YouTube for the Unfound live show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. And for Patreon this week, I need to thank Patty. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Christopher Sanders, Sandy Sanders. Sandy, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. Thank you for getting with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. That's what we do at Unfound, Sandy. It's been a pleasure to get to know you the way I have. Let's start here. Let's talk about just your family in general before we start talking about Chris specifically. Tell the listeners a little bit about how many children you have, where Chris fell in the line of the kids you have. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. Well, Johnny Spencer and I have been together almost 33 years. We have 5 kids together. I had Chris, Jason, and Josh, and Johnny and I have Stormy and Jeremy together. Chris is the oldest. Johnny took on my kids and raised them as if they were his own. Loved them as if they were his own.
Well, he must be a good guy. Must be a good guy, Johnny.
He is.
Okay.
He's great.
Great.
Chris is the oldest. He was born in 1077.
Okay.
Wild child. Yeah, he was my wild child. Always getting in something. The younger kids today even say, Chris ruined everything for us. we can't get by with anything. Because
All
Chris
right,
had already done it.
because he was the oldest, he did all the tricks and everything, and you kind of wised
but
up to
Mama,
all of it, right?
yeah, Mama knew what to look for.
Okay.
But, I mean, there was a lot of, Chris was a recovering addict, and the rest of the kids frowned on it.
Yeah.
And every time he had tried to go into recovery, they had their doubts. But when Chris finally got his life, together, everything worked out. They were regular siblings. I mean, did everything together, laughed together, fought together, camping, whatever. I mean, it was good.
Yeah. So Chris was the oldest. He was born in '77, so he'd be turning 43 this year. I'm not sure what his birthday is off the top of my head. But so yeah, he. What is the age span from the oldest to the youngest of your kids?
Chris, and then Jason was born in. Let's see. Chris was born in '77. Jason was born in 1981. Josh was born in 1985. Stormy was born in 1989, and Jeremy was born in 1990.
Wow, so 13 years difference between the youngest and oldest. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. How did they all get along? You said that Chris was the adventurous one. How did they all get along in general? Say, of course, Chris would have been 13 when the youngest was born, but when he got into his 20s, how did everybody get along?
Great. I mean, like I said, that's the time that he was into his drugs and stuff. They didn't have a lot to do with him.
Okay.
But once he got, like I said, his life turned around, they ride their four-wheelers or motorcycles, go camping, fishing. I mean, it's just typical brother and sister.
Okay, cool. All right, so Chris was born in '77. Did he go to, I guess he went to high school, graduated? What kind of interests and hobbies and things did he have?
Well, he quit his senior year.
Did he?
He went back to get his, and he's super smart, especially with numbers. He went back and got his GED. He loved riding his Harley. He loved collecting arrowheads. He absolutely loved to fish.
To fish?
He told me if he could fish, if he could fish every day, that would be the perfect life. But he said he could think. And one of the last times I was with Chris, he was down at, we call it the Bottoms. It's a little tributary or whatever off the lake. He called me and said, I'm down here fishing. Come on down. And I went down for 2 or 3 hours and just watched him fish. He didn't catch anything worth keeping, but we had a good time. And he was just relaxed. So, yeah, he could fish every day.
I have to ask, why did he drop out of school his senior year? So close to graduating, why did he drop out?
Because he was a hard head and he wasn't going back to school. He wanted to go to work and drive truck.
Okay.
His uncle taught him how to drive the 18-wheeler, and that's what he did for 20-something years. Loved it. Loved being on the road, but he hated being away from his family.
So let me just about 1995, maybe something like that, is when he started driving a truck. About right, mid-90s.
Yeah.
Mid-90s.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
He's been all over the United States. All over the United States. He has friends all over the United States. He never, ever meets a stranger.
Okay. And then also, but I did that, and we'll get back into his relationships here in a moment, but he drove truck for about 20 years, and then you had told me that he got into the oil drilling business.
Yeah, well, actually, he went to Monahans and got the oil field business, but he was still driving a truck out there. He would haul whatever, the sand or whatever they needed for different job sites to whatever site they needed. But, yeah, he was still driving an 18-wheeler.
Okay, so instead of driving all over the United States, he was working more locally in Texas with the oil drilling and fracking and natural gas
Yes,
stuff,
he was.
stuff like that.
Yeah, just specifically West Texas, around Monahans and Odessa, Pecos, and places like that.
Okay. And so that offered him the opportunity to be closer to his family, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. That kept him more in Texas.
Yes, he's specifically in Texas, but he was 7 hours from home.
Okay.
So he would work. He would work 3 or 4 weeks on, and then have a week off. So.
Okay. Well, that's probably better than driving all around the United States, right?
Right. Yeah, because a lot of times he would be gone 3 and 4 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And that's what he hated about that part of the driving.
Yeah. Yep. That's my brother Brian was a truck driver for about, let me think, about 18 years, something like that. So I know a little bit about that. My brother Michael was also a truck driver for a much shorter period of time. Yeah. I know about that for sure.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about, you already mentioned he wanted to stay close to his family, but what kind of relationships did he have? How many times was he married? How many kids did he have?
He has 2 kids from a previous relationship. They never married.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually had custody of his daughter, who is the oldest. Mm-hmm. Those kids are his world. Mm-hmm. His son lived with the mom and would go over to Chris's every time Chris was in. And a lot of times most times he would go with Angela and Ashlyn out to Monahans when they went for the weekend or a week or whatever during the summer. Mm-hmm. Chris's world revolved around those 2 kids.
Do you know what year, if he, being that you're the grandma, what years were the 2 kids born?
Well, Ashlyn will be 20 this month.
Oh, okay.
And Kobe will be 18 in June.
All right, so 2000 and 2002. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he was with this woman, but you said they never married. Did they then part ways? They broke up somehow?
Yes, they split.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that was due to the drug abuse at the time.
Okay. Why don't we talk about that first before we then get into Chris's wife, Angela, who we're going to talk about quite a bit during this interview. Why don't we talk a little bit about Chris's addiction? How did that all get started? Do you remember, the day that you figured out maybe Chris did have an addiction?
Well, I know it as a, 15, 16-year-old, he would smoke weed and whatever, and he just graduated to everything else. At one point, he came to my house, and when I turned and saw him, all I could see was death in his eyes. He weighed like 125, 30 pounds, and Chris is normally like 200. And he told me then his drug of choice was whatever was in front of him.
Wow.
He went to rehab. He went to a halfway house. He got into church and turned his life around. Just stopped it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he had any slip-ups or whatever, but I know he's been clean he had been clean for about 8 years before he went missing.
So he was having these drug issues while he was a truck driver going around the United States too?
Oh, yeah.
Was he?
Yeah. And that scares me.
Yeah. I'm sure. You got 18-wheeler, 80,000 pounds going down the highway with maybe a man or woman behind the wheel that maybe has an addiction. Obviously, that can create some dangerous situations. I'm guessing he never had any bad wrecks or hurt anybody. So maybe we have to count the blessings on that. So
exactly.
Right. What do you think? What was it? Do you think that he started when he was 15, 16 with weed, and then got into other things? So let's say about 1993, and then he cleaned up. Maybe let's just pick a year, 2009. What was the final straw, you think, that caused him to clean his act up?
Well, I think he saw that he was about to lose his entire family because I told him I couldn't do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
His siblings said they were done. They weren't going to support him in the addiction. They had never liked it, and they didn't like what it was doing to me. And he came to my house one morning about 3 o'clock, and we sat outside for hours. And I asked him, Chris, what are you going to do if some of this dope you're bringing in, which he was, gets to your baby brother and sister? And I think that finally is what lit the light bulb for him, because that's when he wanted to go into the rehab, and he's walked a straight and narrow since.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, we talk about drugs enough on this program for people to know that a lot of people go to rehab and it doesn't stick the first time or the second time or the third time. So
right.
I'm glad to hear in Chris's case that he was serious about it the first time and it stuck.
Well, it wasn't the first time.
Oh, it wasn't the first. Okay, well, it wasn't the first time. Okay.
It was about the fourth time.
Fourth time. Okay, well, that's very common then. Okay, that's very common. That doesn't stick. All right. Well, I'm glad he found his way out of that for sure. Back in, like I said, it's maybe roughly 2009, 2010, being that you said it was about 8 years before he disappeared.
Right.
Okay, so he had that going on in his life, at least for a while. Let's move on to this. He was married at the time that he disappeared. Her name is Angela.
Yes.
How did they meet? You had told me that she was a bit older than Chris, maybe even 8 years older, something like that, or maybe older, more years than that. How did they meet?
He had just gone through a really bad breakup with a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
New Year's Eve of 2011, Chris and a buddy of his went to a bar, and she was dancing topless on the bar.
And
that's
right?
how he met her, and I raised him better than that. I'm sorry, but anyway.
Okay. So they met at this bar, and how long was it before they got married, would you say?
That was, well, they got married November 11th of 2011.
All right.
So
not long.
11 months.
Okay, so less than a year, and they were getting married. Do you remember how many years she is older than Chris?
I want to say it's like 12, 14. She was born in 63 or 64.
All right, so 13 years older. Okay. So they got married in 2011, and he disappeared in 2017, so they were married roughly, let's just call it 6 years, maybe 5.5 years before he disappeared. No children together?
No, thank God. Okay. She has kids that are almost Chris's age from a previous marriage.
Okay. All right, so she had some kids from a previous marriage. Of course, he had a couple kids from his previous relationship, one of them. 2 kids from one of those previous relationships. How did the two of them get along? Just in general, how often did you see them together? What were your impressions?
How often did I see Chris and her together?
Yeah, I mean, how often did you see them as a couple? Did you see them like at Christmas, or how often did you interact with them?
They were here quite often. Usually, every Sunday after they left church, they would come over. They'd bring the kids over, or Chris would bring the kids over. They showed up here one day going on a bike run, and I had to ask her to leave my house because she's dressed like her. Well, she was dressed inappropriately.
Okay.
And I had to ask her to leave.
Okay.
But
how would you say the two of them got along?
They fought every day. Every stinking day.
How did you think the two of them, when you would see them, how did they get along?
They fought.
Didn't they?
Constantly.
Do you have any idea what they fought about? When you would hear them fighting, when you would see them, once again, just your impression, what were they fighting about?
Money, or she didn't get her way. She wanted to do whatever, and he didn't want to do it, and she just browbeat him until he finally gave in.
Okay. Would you have any idea about how she felt about his work, being that it would take him away, even with with the work of driving truck for this oil company, or even before when he was driving around the United States? You have any idea how she personally felt about him being away most of the time?
Assuming she didn't like it, she would call him and text him constantly. When are you coming in, or are you going to direct deposit your check for whatever? I mean, she was constantly hounding him about money.
Okay. Just to be honest, just to ask you this, is this what Chris was telling you, or what?
Yes. I've heard this so many times from him.
Okay.
His exact words. She's driving me crazy.
Okay. All right. So he got married in 2011, but they were still married come 2017, even though it seems like your impression is that the marriage was not as smooth as people would like. Any idea why, if these things were like this, that Chris, never divorced her or left her? Any ideas?
Actually, like I said, he had custody of his daughter, and she was, living with Chris and her. And I don't know how many times Chris's exact words were, as soon as my daughter graduates from high school, I'm sorry, that she can consider herself divorced.
Okay.
His exact words.
All right, we'll bleep that out.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. But so, in your opinion, what your son was telling you is that he had it in his mind that he wanted to divorce Angela once his daughter graduated from high school.
Yeah, if he had someone that could take care of his daughter before, and I offered, if he had someone to take care of her until she graduated from high school, he'd have divorced her then. But with the way he worked, he wanted Ashlyn to at least have a stable environment. She was used to being, at her home and her routines and whatever. He wanted that to stay as much as it could. So he was willing to tough it out for a year and a half until she graduated.
All right, so she was born in 2000, so I'm guessing she graduated high school 2018, 2019, something like that. Just graduated?
Yes, 2000.
Okay. So at the time of his disappearance, she would have still had at least 1 or 2 more years of school before this divorce could have happened, if that's what he was planning to do?
Yes.
Okay. How do you think that your granddaughter and Angela got along?
My granddaughter didn't speak to me after her dad went missing.
Okay.
I don't know if...
I'm wondering about before he went missing, being that Chris was willing to, even though he seemed to have problems with Angela and them fighting and everything, but he was leaving his daughter with her. I mean, did the two of them get along before Chris disappeared?
They got along. Ashlyn didn't like her, but she tolerated being there. Because, like I said, she didn't want to leave her home and her possessions to move in with me or her mother or anybody else. So she was willing to tough it out. Okay.
Because I'm thinking, being that Chris was gone most of the time, it was just Angela And your granddaughter there, just the two of them under one roof.
Yes.
Okay.
And then his son would go out to visit his sister, and it finally got to where he wouldn't go out there because it was such turmoil out there every time he went.
Okay.
So he just quit going.
Now, you did tell me about something else about Angela. Is it true that one time she stabbed a guy?
Yes. I talked to my friend this morning to re-verify that.
Okay.
And she said she got this. She's friends with this man's sister-in-law. And trying to find my notes. She said that Angela was living with this man before Chris and her got together. And they had argued, and she left and came back. He was in the shower, and he still didn't have the money that she wanted, so she stabbed him through the shower curtain and left him there bleeding. She told him if he called the police, he would be dead in no time. Either her or the banditos would make sure of it, and if her or any of her friends saw him in town, he'd be a dead man. The sister and the sister-in-law took care of this guy. To this day, he will not leave his house because he is that scared of her.
What's his name?
He has not left his house.
What's his name?
He didn't want his name released.
Okay. Does this person who told you this story, does she know the guy's name?
Yes. Yes, she does.
Okay. So this guy is claiming that Angela stabbed him, but he never did go to the police?
No.
All right. Are we sure, because just to play devil's advocate here, are we sure that she just didn't do that out of self-defense? I mean, it was just him and her there. Not trying to defend her, but we only have we only have his side of the story regarding all of this, right?
Right, but my friend said he would never. I asked her the same thing.
Well,
would he strike her, or would And she said no. He's a very sweet, gentle man.
Did he have an injury? Do you know if he went to the hospital for this stabbing? That sounds like pretty serious.
No, he didn't. He did not. His sister-in-law took care of him.
All right, so stabbing couldn't have been too serious that he didn't need medical attention.
Oh, I guess, but I mean, the way my friend told me again this morning was he was absolutely petrified of this woman, and he knew if he went to the hospital, the police would be involved, and she'd already threatened him.
All right. So no charges were ever filed. Do you think that Chris knew about this incident before he got married to Angela?
I don't think he did.
Okay. When did you find out about it?
Speak up.
When did you find out about it?
Not too long after Chris went missing.
All right. So you did not know this while Chris before he disappeared. Being married.
No, I did not.
Never heard this story before until after he disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that this person never told you this before, while your son, was still around and married to Angela? Do you think?
Well, the reason the sister-in-law talked to my friend, there's a little antique shop here that my friend goes to, and the sister-in-law works there, and my friend was there putting out flyers, and the woman was asking about Chris, and my friend asked her, "Do you know Angela?" And she said yes, and then she proceeded to ask my friend if she was friends or family or friends with Angela, and she said no. My friend said no. Chris is like one of my kids. And then the lady proceeded to tell her what had happened with her brother-in-law.
Okay. All right. Okay. Once again, I'm not here to. I think I need, being that we don't have Angela's side to all of this, I think that I have to play devil's advocate maybe at least a little bit. that
Right.
that's it's a very serious thing when you level a charge like that this
Right.
woman Angela stabbed this guy, and especially since he didn't call the police, didn't go to the hospital, and I'm not sure what to make. I'm honest, I'm not sure what to make of it. Um, unless we're actually going to see the stab wound,
Right.
what happened here. So the listeners will have to judge that for themselves. I'm also wondering if, since people seem to know her, that Chris gets married to her. He's married to her for 6 years before he disappears, and not once does anybody go up to him and say, "Hey, this woman? She stabbed this other guy." Before you met her.
Right.
That might have been the nice
Yeah.
thing to do for Chris. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
not saying that he would have divorced Angela or anything because of it, but I think that if Chris knew, I think he would have told you. But
Yeah.
okay, all right. So nobody went to jail. Nobody called the police. Nobody went to the hospital. Okay, let's
Right.
talk. Let's move on to this. Now I have read about this, and that's why I need to bring it up. I know that we talked about Chris's addiction, but did he also was he also possibly bipolar?
Chris was bipolar. He was diagnosed probably 2 years before he went missing.
Mm-hmm.
We had thought for years that he was. He finally went and was tested, and the doctor put him. I can't remember the name of the medication, but he was on the max dosage, and it was like a complete turnaround. I mean, he was either really, really up or so depressed that he was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
But once he started taking this medication, he kind of leveled out and was our Chris again. He loved doing stuff again, and he didn't get mad, and it just leveled him out.
How did he feel about? I mean, who was it that finally said, "Hey, Chris, maybe you got to get checked out for this"? I mean, was it something that he was open to, or was he hesitant about? This.
Actually, it was Chris.
Mm-hmm.
He had gone to the doctor and told him, he said, "Look, something is wrong in my head. I need to get something to help calm me down." He said, "My brain never shuts down, and it's driving me crazy."
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor did the testing and figured out he was bipolar, got him started on medication. Chris started taking it, and with just a couple of weeks, I mean, it blew my mind at what taking one pill a day, or whatever he was taking, could do that much change for him.
That's good.
But yeah, it was Chris's idea.
All right. Well, that was very mature of him. Very conscientious of him to admit it, because my impression, a lot of people that end up being diagnosed with that, I wouldn't say they're being dragged kicking and screaming, but usually they're in denial for a while before they get help. That's my impression, anyway.
Right.
So I'm glad. I'm certain that after he started taking, he was feeling better. You two probably had a conversation about that. How much better.
Yeah. And if he missed the dose, I could tell. Chris, have you taken your medicine? Oh, Mom, I forgot. And he would take it, and things were good.
Okay. So about 2 years before he disappeared, maybe since you brought it up, maybe I should ask this. Did he have an issue not taking his medication once in a while, or what do you think?
He would forget every once in a while to take it when he was like going to be late for work or whatever, but he'd take it as soon as he remembered. But he took it regularly.
Okay. All right, and so we have that going on. So he had this addiction that he found his way through, and then he had a bipolar issue that he also got help for as well. So doing some very positive things there. Let's move on to this. We talked about his work. He was a truck driver, then was still a truck driver, but working for just in Texas. Could you please
Mhm.
once again maybe explain his work schedule, maybe in those months before he disappeared? What was the schedule in general?
Well, he worked for, I believe it was Veolia. It's a company
Mm-hmm.
it was based in Pittsburgh, which is
Yeah, I know that company.
10 miles.
I know that
He
company.
worked for them for, okay.
Yeah.
So he was still in and around East Texas, and he worked a lot of hours there. And they finally shut that office down in Pittsburgh, and that's when he went to West Texas and went to work for Trendsetters.
Okay. And so, how often would he be? You already said this, but I just want to make sure the listeners understand this again. How many days or weeks would he be gone with this job? What was the on and off schedule for this work that he was doing for this in West Texas?
In West Texas, normally he would work like 3 weeks on and then a week off, and he'd come home.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the Wednesday after he went missing, he was supposed to be coming home.
Okay. And you've also and did he get this job because he was working with his cousin Cody? Is that right? Is that how he got the job, or how did that happen?
Well, actually, Cody's dad, Harold Penny, was the superintendent, whatever, on this job. He got Cody and Chris on, and Cody first, of course, and then Chris went in the end of May, first part of June. Like I said, driving the truck, taking sand or whatever to where they needed it.
Okay.
I think he and Cody worked together, not every day, but fairly often. Harold being the superintendent, I guess. I can't remember.
Okay.
He was at all the job sites, but not for very long. But they worked long hours. There were days that they'd put in 16 hours a day. So
wow,
it's long, hard, a lot of hard work.
Okay. So Chris is there, his cousin Cody, and maybe we should just explain this. Cousin Cody, how is Cody Chris's cousin?
He is my baby sister's son.
Okay, so really close.
And she's also married to, he's also, Harold Wayne Penny is my sister's husband.
Okay. All right, so very close. First cousin. Okay. And what Chris was telling you, did he enjoy this work? Was he doing all right? I mean, any issues that he talked about regarding the job itself?
He liked the work. He was in issues with Trendsetters. They had promised him so much a day for his per diem, and they weren't giving it to him. And I know he had words with one of the guys in the office over this, but Harold being the superintendent, finally got that worked out, and that's the weekend Chris went missing.
Okay. All right, so you had this per diem issue, which of course is important for people who are working out of town, especially if they're promised something. They aren't living at home, so they have additional expenses maybe for rent and everything, and we'll get into how he was living and that. All right, so let's go to some issues that that were going on before the disappearance. When you mean West Texas, do you mean where he disappeared from Monahans, Texas?
Yes, he disappeared from Monahans, Texas.
All right. And how far is that from where he was living, where Angela and his daughter were living? How far?
It's 7.5 hours.
So not close, not really, really far. 7.5 hours in Texas, especially since the speed limit can be 75 miles an hour.
Or 90.
Or 90, depending on how much you want to follow the law. Sure. 7 hours, not close, but not terribly far. Okay. And how
Right.
many weeks
Yeah.
was he working in Monahans before he disappeared?
I want to say he went to work the end of May or the very first part of June.
Okay, and he
Worked
disappeared
out
the
there,
middle.
and then
Please.
he he disappeared August the 13th of 2017.
So about 3.5 months, let's say, is how long he was
Yeah.
working there. Okay. And one of the issues that's going to be very important is disappearance is he wasn't like living in a motel or in a house. He had gotten a trailer. How did that come about?
Well, when he first went out, he was Trendsetters had a mobile home that they rented out to the guys. Chris was staying in this mobile home with two other workers. He came in June and bought a used RV and took it back out there. And he wound up parking it at Monahans Affordable Homes, which is an RV park right off of I-20.
Where he
He was living
disappeared
there.
from. Where he disappeared from.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And the listeners should know, by the time you're hearing our voices, that I will have posted a picture of this lot. It's really just a parking lot with trailers in it, right? That's really all it is.
Yes.
It's just.
Yes.
It looks like an abandoned It's not, but it looks like an abandoned Walmart parking lot, really, really big, with just all these trailers lined up.
Uh-huh.
Not like what we'd think like a mobile home park where, there's grass and trees and things. It's just flat pavement.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like a white rock, and it's all of it is RVs or fifth wheels. There's no mobile homes. It's just
right.
It's for the guys that are working from out of town. They may be there one day and gone the next. So.
Okay. Were you surprised that he bought this trailer? I'm going to guess, even though it was used, those aren't cheap. Did it surprise you that he bought one?
Not really, because he wanted his own space, and he wanted some place for the kids to be able to come and stay without having to be on the floor or whatever in his trailer. So he bought that so he could have the kids out there during the summer or on the weekends whenever they could come out. So no, I wasn't surprised.
Okay. And how many weeks did he have this trailer, or months, before he disappeared?
He got it sometime in June.
All right, so about 3 months.
One of his weeks off, he found it.
Okay. So he got this trailer. He's in Monahans, Texas. I'm guessing that you had mentioned Cody. Did Cody have his own trailer there then too?
Yes.
All right, and Cody's father.
Was parked right across. Cody's dad also had his own.
Okay. So all these workers that are away from home, maybe a lot of them have trailers just like Chris had in this parking lot. Okay. Let's move on to this. This is something else. It was regarding Angela and money. What did Chris tell you? Something about money for taxes, and what was this this thing that happened?
When he was working for Veolia, he would give her money to pay for the taxes. He was buying a place, had a double-wide mobile home. It was 18 acres. He would give her the money to pay the taxes. And he found out that she wasn't paying the taxes. She was sending the money to her son, who was incarcerated. And Chris was livid. And that's another reason he went to Monahans, was to try to get the money to save his place.
Wow, so he bought this place. You got to pay like your local real estate taxes or something like that on it, and those weren't getting paid.
Right.
Did Chris tell you about this before he disappeared? Did you know this was going on?
Several. Yes, he told me several times. He would call me or come out here and be venting like crazy. He was over the top mad.
Okay. How many months would you say it was that she pocketed this money? I mean, how much money are we talking here? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Apparently, it was quite a bit. I mean,
Okay.
because Chris wouldn't get mad over
Mhm.
a couple $100 or, it had to be a pretty large amount.
All right, so she's not paying this. She's giving it to one of her sons who is in jail, as you already said. And what was the risk here? Of course, everybody has to pay their taxes if they're whatever they're doing. What was the danger in not paying these taxes? He was going to lose property or something. What would have happened?
Yes, he would have lost his home and the land.
So he would have lost where Angela and his daughter were living.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And what do you think the status of that was at the time of his disappearance? Did he get caught back up, or did he still owe money? Do you know?
I am not really sure. I know he was paying on it. But after he went missing, I know for a fact that she never paid another payment on the house.
Okay. And Chris told you about this. So he told you about this before he went missing several times. So it could have been like 6 months before he went missing that you knew about this? Or
yes.
Okay. All right. So what happened after Chris disappeared? Was she able to still live in that house, or the taxes didn't get paid? Did she move out? What happened to that property then? Do you know?
As of 2 weeks ago, she was still out there. She told a friend of mine that the man that she was buying the property from said she could stay there until Chris got home and didn't have to pay anything. But he's telling us that he's fixing to evict her because she hasn't paid a penny.
Okay. So
she did go to jail the end of February for theft of services.
Okay. All right, so we had this money thing going on. She's giving it to her son instead of paying the taxes on the property, which of course is very important. And do you even know how Chris found out about this? Did he get like a phone call or something, or?
He was looking through his bank statement, and things just weren't adding up, and he questioned her about it, and she finally confessed to him that she had been sending it to Rance, her son. Okay. All right, we'll move to, being that was about money, that would lead us to this. There was a party that was held the day before. That would have been a Saturday evening in Monahans. And a lot of the guys that Chris works with were there. What happened at this party regarding a phone call? Well, they had ordered pizza in, and Harold Wayne, his boss, said Chris got a phone call, was very agitated. He couldn't hear the voice, but he could tell by the way Chris was talking and the way he was flinging his arms and everything that it was the wife. And Harold asked him to please take it over there. They were tired of hearing all that. So. And what were they arguing Chris about? Chris walked up. He, like I said, he couldn't hear. It was. He said this is like an everyday occurrence. She'd call and they'd argue, but like I said, he couldn't hear. He knows Chris so well. He knows his mannerisms and. Okay. Anyway. Did you, at the time, did you know that Chris had this phone call, this argument on the phone, or did you not find out about this until after he disappeared? I didn't find out until afterwards. Okay. So the day before he goes missing, he's in Monahans. There's this party.
Got pizza. Do you know where this party was? Was it on that property where the trailers were, or was it somewhere else?
Yes. It was at the RV park.
Okay, at the RV park. Okay, and that's where that happened. Okay. And we also have to remind the listeners something else that was going on. You've already stated it, that Chris had talked to you at least a couple times about how he was thinking about divorcing Angela. And now that we've gone through all these things, maybe there are some very good reasons why he was thinking about doing that. Especially with the money situation.
Right.
Okay, so he had all these things going on. He was working in Monahans, where he disappeared. He got this trailer, had this money that was supposed to be going toward taxes, and that's not where it was going. We have this party where he was arguing seemingly with Angela, and I think we have proof that it was Angela. And then he's talking about divorcing her once his daughter gets out of high school, which would have been at least maybe a year or two away. So let's move to the day, that morning that he disappeared. Well, of course, you were not there, so you've learned about this from people who were there and the stories that they've told. What have you been told about? We have already gone through who Cody is, but maybe this is maybe we should talk about this guy first. We'll just use his first name. Who is Jason?
Actually, Jason is one of the guys that lived in the RV park. And when I talked to you, I had the wrong name.
Okay.
He lived there.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that saw Chris leave, his name is Matthew. You want his last name?
No, let's just use his first name. We're not going to get into last names.
Okay.
But his name is Matthew.
Okay.
All right. So Matthew is a coworker. He and Chris work together, kind of.
No, he only lived in the RV park. He worked for a different company.
Oh, he did.
But he was outside his RV and saw Chris rummaging through his Tahoe, and he'd go from the Tahoe back to his RV and back and forth. And he said he finally just slammed the front door and started walking off. The alarm started going off. He watched Chris go through a barbed wire fence, cross the frontage road, up the little hill, and headed east on Interstate 20.
Okay.
He watched him walk across the bridge, and that was the last time that we know of that Chris was seen.
Okay. And once again, for the listeners, by the time you're hearing our voices, I will have posted some pictures of some Google satellite views, maybe even a couple street views of this area, so all of you can see it. You can find those pictures either on the Facebook page or in the group or on Instagram. If you're interested in seeing those pictures, I will have posted them by the time you're hearing our voices. So Matthew just happens to be outside doing something. Did he know Chris? Do you know if he knew Chris did they ever talk before or anything?
Yeah, they had talked. They'd hang out in the evenings and BS, but Matthew didn't know Chris well, but he knew who he was and knew he was family, with Cody and Harold, and said that Chris was a likable guy. He had no issues with him, it just concerned him that he walked off like that.
Okay. And approximately what time was that on that Sunday morning that Matthew said this happened?
I was told around 9:30 a.m.
Okay. Have you ever had a chance to talk to Matthew one-on-one since this happened?
Actually, he called a friend of mine and wanted a three-way conversation, and yes, I listened.
Okay.
While he talked to my friend.
Okay, great. And so your friend was asking the questions, and he was answering them.
Yes.
Just about that morning, what he saw, what he remembers.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, granted, this is
Please.
Pardon?
I was going.
This was like a year and a half after Chris went missing that we finally tracked this guy down.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask you. How long after the disappearance? So you were ahead of me on that one, Sandy. So like a year and a half. So you did not get to hear this conversation or this conversation did not take place, let's say, until early 2019, maybe?
Right.
Okay. When you say that you finally tracked him down, I just have to ask, was he hard to find? Do you think he was avoiding talking to you or to your friend, or it was just, well, we only have his first name, so he was hard to find? What is your impression?
We didn't have his name for a long time.
Okay.
I finally got a few. I requested open records from Monahans, and apparently the girl that sent me the records messed up. But anyway, the guy's name was in there.
Okay.
And we tracked him down, and yeah, he talked to us. He had no problems talking to us.
Okay. Good. So he wasn't, your opinion, once, being that I don't have in my notes that this actually happened, but while listening, did you think he was evasive on any questions? Did his story change? Any inconsistencies? Anything at all that you could determine?
I didn't notice anything. I think he was being pretty honest with us.
Okay. That's all I'm asking. Okay. So let me just ask you some questions then. So Matthew's out there. Chris comes out going back and forth between the trailer and the truck. And then Chris walks away, but the alarm is going off on his truck. So then are we to believe that Chris is walking away from his truck even though the alarm's going off?
That's what he said.
That's what Matthew said. Okay.
Yes.
When Matthew was talked to a year and a half later, did he try to yell at Chris like, "Hey man, why are you leaving your truck?" Did he try to get Chris's attention at all or anything?
I don't think he even said if he tried to get a hold of Chris or yell at Chris or anything. He did get in touch with my nephew, Cody, and Cody was not on site. I talked to him Friday. He was away from the RV park. He got there about 30 to 40 minutes after Chris went missing.
Okay, well, we'll get to Cody in a minute, but let's just talk about Matthew for a moment. So once again, Matthew is saying that he saw Chris walk away from his own truck, but the alarm's going off on Chris's truck, but Matthew doesn't say to him, "Hey man, your alarm's going off. What are you doing?" Nothing like that he stated.
Not that I recall.
Okay. Are we sure? Is he sure that it was Chris? How close was he to see this? Is he sure it was Chris?
He was fairly positive it was Chris. This guy's camper was right next to Chris's.
So really close.
Yeah, and I mean, their RVs were on the back road, or the nearest to the frontage road.
Yeah.
Chris's was in the very corner, and this Matthews was next to it, I believe.
All right, so very close, within, let's say, 100 feet.
Or, yeah, way less.
Way less than that. So Chris is going back and forth, and he just takes off, leaves his truck with the alarm going off for some reason that I don't. Just listeners are certainly going to think about that. That morning when Matthew was out there, was anybody else? Did Matthew see anybody else outside their trailers or anything while this was happening?
If he did, he didn't tell us.
Okay.
I feel like if he had, he would have said something.
Okay. And so Cody also had a trailer in this park because he worked for the same company that Chris did. And you had already mentioned Cody was out somewhere and he got home, got back to the trailer park. What did you say, 40 minutes later or something?
30 or 40 minutes, something like that.
Okay. So from there, what is your understanding of what happened from there?
Cody raised the hood on the Tahoe, disconnected the batteries to shut the alarm off. He said the driver's door was standing wide open. He immediately called his dad, Harold. Harold happened to be in Pecos, which is about 40 miles from Monahans. Harold stopped what he was doing and got in his truck and drove from Pecos to Odessa, which is like 47 miles. He said he was doing 105 all the way to Odessa trying to catch up with Chris. He didn't see him all the way to Odessa. He pulled into the Love's truck stop and went inside. He wasn't there. So he turned around and came back to Monahans, still looking for Chris.
Okay. Now, when Cody gets back to the trailer park, Chris is already gone. At what point does Matthew go over to Cody and say to him, "Hey, you know, your cousin Chris," maybe he didn't even know they were cousins. Chris walked off. His truck's blaring. What time did Matthew and Cody talk that morning?
I'm not sure on that. I know there's a phone call from Cody
to Chris.
To Chris.
Okay, let's talk about that right now. So, Chris leaves approximately 40 to 50 minutes later. Cody, wherever he is, he comes back. At some point, Matthew, of course, the alarm's, I guess, still going off, 40-some minutes later, I guess, which I think would drive everybody nuts, especially...
It would drive me crazy.
Yeah, and like you said, did you say that the driver's side door was open on the truck?
Yes. Matthew said he slammed the door and it bounced back open and he took off walking. Okay.
So everybody's just standing around. This truck's blaring. Finally, Cody gets back, and Matthew talks to Cody, and Cody finally does something about, I guess, unhooking the battery, which would, of course, set the alarm off. But Cody then calls Chris, and what time did that happen, and what was the content of the call?
The call was at 11:51 a.m. He called Chris and asked him where he was. Chris said, "I'm walking, trying to clear my head." Cody asked him, asked him, "Where are you at?" He said, "I'll come pick you up." And Chris said, "Just leave me alone. I've got to clear my head." The phone call, I know, was 4 minutes long. And I asked Cody Friday when I talked to him what else was said. He said, "Aunt Sandy, when Chris gets mad, if he doesn't want to say anything, he doesn't want to say anything." He said there was a lot of silence. And he said Chris finally hung up on him. And he called back immediately. The phone was already turned off. Okay. So we have to remember that seemingly, as far as Matthew remembers it, Chris leaves at 9:30. And so 2 hours and 21 minutes later, Cody calls Chris, and Chris says that he's still walking 2 hours and 21 minutes later. That's what the phone call was. Yes. Okay. And did you also say that Cody's father was out on the highway trying to track Chris down and did not see him? He did not see him. All right. So if Chris was walking, he wasn't walking on I-20. Don't get me the line.
Excuse me?
All I know is that's the direction he was headed.
Yeah, that's right. He went out, Harold was out on I-20, riding around, went out to this Love's, came back, did not see Chris at all.
No.
Okay. All right, so what we are to believe is 2 hours and 21 minutes later, Chris is still walking somewhere. That's a long way to walk. The average person walks between 3 and 4 miles an hour. Let's just say 3 miles. So 3 miles an hour, that's 6 miles. That's like he could have walked like 8 miles or 7 miles, something like that, from 9:30 and 2. So he could have gone quite a ways. Okay, could have if he was walking the whole time. Okay. It was Cody that shut the alarm off. And what do you have any idea what Cody and Matthew and Harold did for the rest of the day, being that Chris didn't come back? Did they go out and look for him? What did they do?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
I know the police were not called.
Okay. So they didn't. So once Harold came back from going out to that Love's, it's not like they all got in their trucks and tried to ride around individually and try to find him.
Neither one of those, Harold or Cody, said anything about that when I talked to them Friday.
Okay. So we go through Sunday. We get in to Monday. What does everybody do on Monday? I'm going to guess that Monday was go back to work day, and Chris isn't there. What does everybody do?
Harold had to fire Chris for a no-show. They went to work and came home.
And still nobody called the police to report him missing?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
She finally calls.
Hold on a second.
Like
Hold on a second. We'll get to that. So on that Monday, Chris doesn't show up. Just because of that, his own uncle fires him, even though Chris's truck is still there, his trailer's there. Did they try to get into the trailer either that Sunday or the next day? Anybody check it out?
The police. The RV was locked.
Okay.
So they couldn't. Cody went around and banged on the windows and the doors, and said the front door was locked.
Okay, so the door on the truck was wide open and the alarm was blaring, but Chris locked the trailer instead.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So when does somebody alert the police, and when does somebody get into the trailer?
This Matthew said he called, but I've not heard anything about that from the police department or the Texas Ranger.
Okay.
The wife finally calls at like 2 a.m. Tuesday morning. Said she was headed there, and two officers met her there, and they went into the camper with her key. They opened it with her key.
So there were two keys to the trailer, the one Chris had and the one she had?
Yes.
Okay,
so his keys, his wallet, and his phone.
Okay, so somebody let her know, and so she seemingly drove the 7 hours from where she lived, in the place that she wasn't paying the taxes on, to Monahans. The police are there. They get into the trailer, and please say again what was found in the trailer.
His medicine. The TV was on, the air conditioner was on, and his medicine was sitting on the table.
Okay. So we know that he took...
no sign of any...
Please.
Pardon?
Go ahead, please.
There was no sign of any kind of struggle, or they say it was a astrolabe there. So.
Okay. So no signs of violence or anything else, and of course, if we're to believe Matthew, he said that Chris just walked off, so there shouldn't be any signs of anything in there. But his medicine was there, and TV, AC are on. Of course, he has his phone since Cody called him. Any ID? He took his wallet, ID with him?
He took his wallet, his keys, and his phone was all he took with him.
Okay. All right, so just looked like what Matthew said. He walked off, left the door to his truck open with the alarm blaring, but for some reason, on the other hand, locked his trailer. Okay. How do you find out that your son is missing?
I get a phone call about 10 or 10:30 Wednesday night, the 16th, from his wife, and she just chit-chats for a few minutes, and then, oh, by the way, Chris has been missing since Sunday. Well, I flipped my lid, and she says, do you think I need to file a missing persons report? And I really flipped on her. I wound up cussing her out and hanging up on her, and immediately called Cody. He was on his way in from West Texas. And I just asked him, I said, why didn't you call me about Chris? And he said, Aunt Sandy, she promised me Monday that she had called you. And I told him, anytime that woman's mouth is moving, she's lying. No, she did not call me.
Okay. Is she the one that told you the circumstances, or was it Cody or somebody else that told you the circumstances about Matthew being out there, Chris walking away, etc.? Or who was it? How did you find out all these details that you've just been through with me?
I didn't hear anything from Cody or Harold Wayne until I called. They said they were under the impression that she had called.
Okay.
After I talked to her, I called my local PD, and they said I would have to file a missing persons report in Monahans.
Mm-hmm.
I went. My sister-in-law was a police officer in a little town here. I was in her office at 8 o'clock the next morning, and she started making the phone calls and getting the paperwork ready. And by the time I got all the information she needed, it was Friday morning. I was back in her office. She called Detective Tana, who was over this case, and she mentioned the fact that Chris was bipolar and on blood pressure medicine. And he said the wife had been in there, or the wife had met with the two officers and never mentioned that Chris was bipolar.
Okay.
He suggested that I leave her office and go to my sheriff's office, which took me about 10 minutes. And by the time I got to the sheriff's office, Quintana and the ranger were already filling out the paperwork, put Chris in NAMUS and CODIS and all the rest of it. Quintana said, had she told them he was bipolar, they could have started and done a search immediately. But his officers saw the medicine sitting on the table. So anyway, I filed the missing persons report myself on August the 18th.
So Angela did not do that.
No, Angela has done. Quintana told me that she called about 4 o'clock on the 16th to request a welfare check for Chris. She already knew he'd been missing for 3 days. And then she calls me 6 hours later to let me know. Okay.
How did she find out that Chris was missing? Did Cody or Harold call her? How did she find out? Do you know?
I'm assuming one of them. I'm assuming Cody called her. I don't know.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay. When you talked to her that Wednesday when she finally did tell you, in your words, she kind of just told you in passing. In fact, that makes it sound like she called you, but it wasn't the first topic you talked about. It just came up later.
Well, she just chit-chatted, about nothing. And then it's like an afterthought. Oh, by the way, Chris has been missing since Sunday.
Okay. Would you say that she sounded worried on that phone call that Wednesday,
No.
3 days after?
No.
Okay.
No.
At that time?
She never sounded right.
Okay. Did she ever, at that time, did she voice a theory as to where he could be?
She figured he just got mad and walked off, and he'd be back in a day or two.
Okay. All right. And so by the time that you'd already talked to her, she had already been to Monahans because she went over there to unlock the trailer.
Yes.
All right. Do you know where she was when she called you? Was she at home?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have no idea where she was.
Okay. So what you're saying is the police got into the trailer before a police report was ever filled out?
Well, they filled it out after they...
Well, what I'm saying is you said that you found a missing persons report on the 18th, but I think you said that she unlocked the trailer like on that Tuesday, so like the 15th.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I filed the missing persons report. She had just, well, she went to the office and they told her, she had told a friend of mine, they told her they couldn't file a missing persons report for 72 hours, and they gave her some paperwork to fill out. They told her if Chris didn't show up for work the next morning, to have this paperwork filled out and bring it back to them at the office. She never contacted them again to let them know if he worked, and she did not return the paperwork. This is in the paperwork I have from Monahans.
Okay. All right. So, it's like 5 days later when you finally fill out the missing persons report. I mean, did the police do anything? Did they, like with Chris's picture, did they go to like the truck stops? To your knowledge, did they do anything to try to figure out if anybody had seen Chris in that area?
No, they never went and talked to anybody at the RV park. They never talked to anybody at Trendsetters. Any flyers or anything that was put out by myself or friends or people even from Monahans contacted us, telling us if we would get them flyers, they would hang them for us. There was never a search, an official search done for Chris. I have that in black and white. There was a search done by, he's a veterinarian in Monahans. He and 5 or 6 of his service friends went one weekend and searched around, it's called Perch Lake. They didn't find anything. But as far as an official search, there's never been one. Okay. I know they have the ranger has red flagged all Chris's numbers, driver's license, social, and everything. So if he were to get pulled over or go to work somewhere, it would red flag. But so far, nothing. Okay. Let's talk about the trailer a little bit more. You said that she finally was the one that unlocked it. The police go in. There was nothing really unusual in there. Maybe the medication being left behind maybe might stick out to some people. How long did the trailer sit there, and what happened to it? She went on the 18th. Her and I believe her sister drove to Monahans, picked up the camper and the Tahoe, and brought it back to Chris's place in Cason. Okay. And what happened to the trailer? Was told she bleached the inside of it, but she wound up selling it. Okay. So Chris bought the trailer in mid-June, and she sold it by when? September? September, early October, or something like that. Okay, so they only owned it for a total of like 4 months or something like that. Okay. Yes. All right, so if he's not there, the person who owns the park is going to say probably trailer needs to go, and being that Chris got fired, there's no probably reason for the trailer to remain to sit there. I mean, I can see that. So, okay. But so the rent was paid up. The rent was paid up until the end of August. Okay. And she tows it back to Cason, Texas, and then she sells it after you said that she cleaned it using bleach. I'm sure people will be suspicious about that. I really don't know what to make of that. I mean, she was in the trailer. Other people were in the trailer after she unlocked it. If there was anything that was to be seen, then they would have seen it. Let's move on to this. We talked about Cody's call. You just spoke to him recently, and he said that Chris just needed to clear his head out, but the call, as you know, was like 4 minutes long. What did he say about that again? He just said, you know how Chris is when he gets mad. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of silence. So,
Mm.
and I mean, he's right.
Mm-hmm.
When Chris is so mad, he's trying to get his head together. So I could see 4 minutes now.
Okay. Okay. So the words might have been only 30 seconds, but the call, at least on the records that you've seen, it was for 4 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. And Chris said that he was walking somewhere.
He was walking eastbound on I-20.
Okay. Even though Harold had been up the highway in that direction and hadn't seen him.
Right.
Okay. All right. Regarding Chris's records, I mean, do we have a ping of where his phone last pinged from when that call happened? Do you know?
No. I have not been able to get anything from the police department.
Okay. So we know that you've seen the records to see who called him, and that was Cody of 1151. You know how long the phone call was, but you don't know of any ping information of what tower the call was bouncing off of.
No. And I've talked to the ranger out there, and he says hit and miss. He had talked about doing a geofencing to see if they could ping. He says it's fairly new technology, but it's not going to work out there because there are so few towers.
Yeah. All right. Now, we can't talk about some other phone records. And let's start here. Is there any proof about where Angela was? I think we're not talking about her. We always talk about spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends in these disappearances because they sometimes do make decent suspects for all sorts of different reasons. But do we have any records as to where Angela was specifically on the 13th when Chris was seen walking away from his truck?
No, she said she was in church, but I've talked to several people that go to the church. She was not there.
Yeah.
I have seen some records.
Okay.
Where her phone was not used on the 13th until 5:52 p.m.
Later that day, much later that day.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any records that show that Angela could have been in Monahans maybe in the day or two? Let me rephrase that. Is there any proof that Angela could have been in the area of Monahans, Texas in the couple days before Chris disappeared?
I've seen some records where her phone and my granddaughter's phone pinged from in Pecos and Mentone and Monahans, the 11th and the 12th.
So so that would be the Friday and the Saturday before. The 2 days before and the day before. You've seen evidence that Angela, at least her phone and Chris's daughter's phone, were in that general area, if not, the general area of Monahans, Texas.
Correct.
Has your granddaughter or Angela ever explained why they were in the Monahans area, even though they live 7 hours away, as we've already talked about?
No, I have not spoken to Angela since the night she called me to let me know Chris was missing.
Okay.
And my granddaughter, like I said, I am just now getting to where I can speak to her and see her now that she has been out of that house for about a year.
Okay. So, and I know this would be a difficult conversation, but you've never had a chance to ask your granddaughter why her phone would have pinged in Monahans, Texas, a day or two before Chris disappeared in Monahans, Texas.
No, I haven't been able to talk to her, but she was in school
Mm-hmm.
This child never missed a day of school from the time she started kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard Chris tell me repeatedly, if the wife called and he didn't answer, she would immediately get his daughter's phone and call, because he knew that, or she knew that more than likely he would answer his daughter's before he would hers.
Okay, so if he, are you saying that if Chris was avoiding Angela, that then she'd use the daughter's phone to call Chris?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And there are several of those. It's her phone and then my granddaughter's.
Okay.
Her phone and my granddaughter's.
All right, because I think that if that is true, I mean, Cason, where they live, is, like you said, 7.5 hours away. So there's no way that a phone that's in Cason could ever ping off a tower in Monahans.
Right.
But once again, this was not on the day of the disappearance. This was like a day or two before the disappearance.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Where you would think that both the daughter and Angela would have been in Cason, not in the area of Pecos, anywhere near Monahans.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Chris's phone. We talked about how he and Angela had this phone call that Saturday evening during the party. Were there any other calls between him or texts between after that phone call where he and Angela were arguing until the call the next morning with Cody? Any phone calls, texts at all from Chris's phone?
No, none.
So total communication silence between those two.
Uh-huh.
Would you say that, given what you know about Chris, or maybe having seen his records, maybe just knowing his patterns of calling and texting, do you think that's unusual?
It would be unusual for him to avoid my calls, but
I guess what I'm saying is, was he a guy that did a lot of texting with people? Do you find it unusual that he did not use his phone at all for a total of, let's just say,
yes.
16 hours?
Yes.
That's fairly...
I mean, Chris's phone was like normally attached to his ear.
Okay. Okay, so no calls between the argument phone call and Cody's phone call the next day from sometime in the evening. Let's just pick out 8 o'clock p.m. August 12th until 11:51 a.m. August 13th. Nothing.
9:22 p.m. Saturday night.
9:22 p.m. Thank you. So let's just round that off to 9:30. So 9:30, 12 hours, 14. So 14 hours and 20 minutes of radio silence from Chris's phone.
Mm-hmm.
Until the Cody phone call. All right.
Yes.
Is it possible, to your knowledge, is it possible that Chris could have had another phone?
No.
Okay.
I've never seen with two. She has two.
Angela has two?
Yes.
Yeah. Or is that in addition? In addition to the daughters that she used once in a while?
Yeah, she had a phone for her calls and she had a phone for texts.
Okay. Let's move on to this. We kind of already talked about, but let's go through this again, just because this is, we have to do this. Where does Angela say she was on the morning of August 13th, 2017? Where does she say?
She says she was in church here in Dangerfield, Texas.
And how far is Dangerfield from Monahans, Texas?
I'm less than 10 miles from Chris's house, so about the same, 7.5.
7.5 hours. Okay. She says she was in church. Have you, since August 2017, have you ever been able to find anybody who saw her in church that morning?
No.
Okay. Would there have been, do you know people who go to that church that would have seen her if she was there?
I do.
Okay.
I talked to the lady that does the attendance, and she said she was not there.
Okay. Now, we also have to remember that Angela had a couple children from prior relationship. at least one of those sons was in jail at some point in 2017 because she was siphoning this money to him in jail. Being that Angela had a couple children, and it seems at least one of them had problems with the law, being that he was in jail, and she was sending him money as it was in jail while he was in jail. Do you know the whereabouts of any of her children on the morning of August 13th, 2017?
I don't. She also has another son that is in and out of jail. The one that we're talking about now that was in that she was sending money to is now back in jail.
Okay. Were any of these sons, were they in jail at the time of Chris's disappearance?
I want to think that Rance got out right before Chris went missing.
Okay. Do you know what kind of relationship, if any relationship, Chris had with these two sons? Did they get along? Did Chris ever say anything to you about having any problems with them? Anything?
Chris and the older son got along pretty good. He and the one that was in jail did not. As a matter of fact, Chris told her after he found out she was sending the money that he did not want Rance back on his property. Yet he's been living out there off and on when he's not in jail at Chris's place.
Okay.
Chris would be livid.
Well, that would probably make sense then. I think that a lot of people would feel that same way. What did Angela do after Chris disappeared? You said that you have not talked to her since 3 days after he disappeared way back in 2017. What has she done with her life since then?
Well, she's not helped us. She has gone on to bar hopping and from man to man to man. She's been in jail.
Why?
Why was she in jail?
Yes.
Theft of services.
From the tax issue?
No, from stealing electricity.
Stealing electricity? Wow.
She's supposedly moving to a place near her parents, and I'm assuming they hooked the power up. Anyway, the police came out, and I don't know if they had to go get a warrant or whatever, but they got her and 5 or 6 others as they were pulling back into Chris's yard. Her oldest son being one of them.
Stealing electricity. Okay. I'm wondering how they did that. That's some wiring. That probably was a dangerous job for somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but she's also. You might have to edit this.
Okay, let's just move on. Let's just move on to the next topic. Being that they were married, did Chris have any life insurance that Angela would collect if he died?
Chris had life insurance through Trendsetters, but when he was fired, that was null and void. But she had gone to work at an egg factory or something after Chris went missing, and she somehow took out an insurance policy on him.
After he was missing?
Yes. But she's since been fired from that job.
Okay.
Now, she's not doing anything. But a friend of mine...
Okay, we just can't talk by that without getting into that a little bit more. I mean, how did you find out that she tried to do that, Angela, with the insurance and this other job? How did you find that out?
She told a good friend of mine.
Okay. And she admitted that she admitted that she tried to get insurance taken out on a
missing person?
Yeah, she admitted to this person that she tried to get insurance taken out on Chris, who was missing. She admitted to that?
She said she did have insurance on Chris.
Okay. All right. And she got that insurance before he went missing?
No, it was after he went missing.
All right. Would she not have had to have forged some paperwork or something to do that?
Yes, she would have. And she would have no problem with that.
Okay, so that's why I'm asking you, why would she admit to doing something that was illegal to a friend of yours? The listeners, unfortunately, it's my job to do so, and I'm sorry that I have to put you in this, but I have to ask questions like that. Why people admit to doing things that they know probably are illegal to just random people? I have to ask.
She doesn't care, and she doesn't realize that who she's telling this to is my friend.
Okay. So I'm guessing she was unsuccessful at this insurance scam?
Well, I mean, she told her she'd taken it out, but like I said, she got fired from the job.
Okay.
So it's, null and void. But I do know that about 6 weeks after Chris went missing, she tried to see if she could get his Social Security and cash in on a previous life insurance policy.
A previous one. Had it expired, or what does that mean, previous?
Well, she used to sell insurance, and she had coverage for her and Chris, and she tried to cash that in after he went missing.
All right, it lapsed or something. Did they hadn't continued to pay the premiums or something, or what?
Well, she kept the insurance up, but I think the company already had wind that Chris was missing, so she was not able to do that.
All right, because he's not, and as of today, we're doing this interview on April 13th, 2020. Has Chris ever been declared deceased?
No.
All right, so even if they had life insurance, she couldn't collect on it anyway. Not yet, anyway.
Right.
If they had any.
Right.
Okay, so to your knowledge, has she ever had tried to declare him deceased?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. And all right. It's interesting. Okay. And you said that now, like 2.5 years later, she has another man in her life. Are they still married? Has she ever done divorce paperwork?
No, she's not going to divorce Chris because she's waiting to have him declared dead. As far as another man, she's had several, including some of Chris's so-called friends.
Okay.
And she's had girlfriends. I've got pictures of her in a bar.
Okay. All right.
With a man.
Okay, so she's still living in the house where she and Chris lived?
Well, she's moving is what she's telling my friend.
All right, but she's living in the same house that she was when Chris went missing. Okay. And where does your granddaughter live now?
She lives actually with Angela's daughter and son-in-law in Pittsburgh, which is a good thing. They're awesome people.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
She's going to college.
Or Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Pardon me?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Pittsburgh, Kansas?
Texas.
Pittsburgh, Texas. I didn't even know there was a Pittsburgh, Texas. Okay.
There's a Pittsburgh, Texas.
Pittsburgh, Texas. I didn't know that. Okay. And who's she living with? She's living with who?
With Angela's daughter and son-in-law.
And do you think that's a good thing for your granddaughter?
It's a very good thing.
All right, so
it's a very good thing.
All right, so are you saying that Angela's daughter is nothing like her mother?
No, she's nothing like her mother.
Okay. All right. Now, at some point, Angela allegedly had her own theory as to what happened to Chris. What did she say, and who did she say this to, and when did she say it?
She said she said Chris is in the bottom of a well right along with his phone. She was at this bar in Lone Star, and my niece was there, and
Mm-hmm.
She also told them that they wouldn't ask her, are you voting Chris? No. Well, where do you think he is? Exactly where he needs to be, in the bottom of a flipping well, right along with his phone.
No, we've certainly spoken a lot about Angela. We're not doing that because we're going after her. But anytime these disappearances happen, men or women, spouses and boyfriends, girlfriends, ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, seemingly are always a topic. And we do know that relationships are the number one instigator of disappearances. There's no doubt about that. After covering over 170 disappearances, that is surely that's the statistic. I think drugs and some other issues would be second and third, but relationships are number one. So I have to ask you this: is there any proof that Angela or anybody that could be connected to her was in Monahans, Texas, on the morning of August 13th, 2017? Any proof of that at all?
Other than those phone records.
All right, but that was. But once again, that was from the days before. That was not the day of that Matthew saw Chris walk off. I'm asking you specifically for that day. Any proof that Angela or anybody who would do her bidding, if she wanted to harm Chris, and we're not saying that she would, but any proof that she was in Monahans, Texas on August 13th, 2017?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. What's this been like for you? Of course, Chris is your oldest. You know that what you've talked about, how he fought through some things, a drug addiction, a bipolar disorder, kind of gotten a lot of things, right in his life. Seemed like maybe he picked the wrong woman to be married to, but a lot of people do that. We can't hold that against them. That's why the divorce rate's like 50% in the United States. What has this been like for you over the last 2.5 years, Sandy?
It's been hell. I mean, the not knowing. I don't sleep. Every waking moment, my son is on my mind. I wonder what I could have done. What haven't I done? There's no words to describe it. I don't know. It's just, I feel helpless. A mom's supposed to protect her kids, and I wasn't able to do that. I just want my son home, or to know why he isn't home. I want to know why.
How have your other children reacted to this?
They've kind of distanced themselves. They know if I find out something they need to know, that I'll let them know. But my daughter's in nursing school, and the boys all work, and I mean, it's not that they're not concerned, but they know that I am never going to give up until I have answers.
Yeah. Whether
he's alive or dead, I need to know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the one to have to tell them that their brother's gone. It's been hard.
Yeah. This topic has come up before, at least a few times, my discussions, public discussions, interviews with other parents who they have multiple children, and one of their children has disappeared. And, finding that balance between, being vigilant and trying to figure out what happened to the missing child, but then also not diverting attention away from the other children who are still around.
Right.
And many parents have talked about, trying to find the right balance, because
Right.
even though the other children are concerned about their brother or sister being missing and they want to try to help and everything, they also don't want it to be the topic of conversation all the time either, because you know what, they have their own lives and everything else too.
Right.
So it's a very tough fine line to walk, for sure.
It is. It is, and we don't. I mean, we don't talk about Chris being missing. If we talk about Chris, it's something stupid he did or something.
Mhm.
Oh, Chris would like to do that, or it's more together. It's not morbid. It's
Mhm.
sharing memories, I guess.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know I have 4 of the kids,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a hard line to balance.
Yeah.
But
Right.
anyway,
Right.
yeah, it's been hard. It's been real hard.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
Now, you've like you said, you've been married for 30 some years to your current husband, but Chris, of course, had a different father. Has he been involved in any of this at all, or
No,
what? Nothing.
no. When he walked out, um, Josh, my youngest son was a baby. He walked out and just never looked back.
Okay.
And I don't know where he is. I don't know if he knows.
Wow.
I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Do you have a website or a Facebook page, other things set up for Chris? I do have to admit that even before you and I spoke for the first time, Sandy, that I'd seen, in fact, I think that I even remember when Chris went missing. We were already doing the program at that point in 2017. In fact, it had been about a year, almost a year, that Unfound had existed. And I even think I remember seeing those first news reports about Chris being missing way back in 2017. And that is the way I seem to remember it. And we have covered quite a few disappearances in Texas, so it would make sense then that I would know about Chris going missing from there and in noticing it. But it does seem that, and I once in a while before we've spoke the first time, I would see posts on Facebook or places. So I know that somebody or you or somebody is out there certainly keeping his face and his information in front of everybody, because I know that I've run across it several times since 2017. So what are you doing? You have Facebook page, etc. What do you have?
We have a Facebook page. It's What Happened to Chris Sanders, a.k.a. Dog, D-O-G-G.
Mm-hmm.
If someone had information and wanted to talk to us confidentially, we have a private message section on there. They can contact me, or they could contact Karen Knuckles, and our numbers are on the page and on every flyer we put out, or they could contact local authorities if they wanted. But our Facebook page is, a friend of mine set that up, and Karen Knuckles Phillips, God bless her, posts something every single day.
I recognize the name. I recognize
she's
the
involved name. She's also involved in, there's like 8 cases, missing person cases within like 75 miles of Dangerfield. And she's helped these folks get pages set up and pointing them in the right direction and everything. So she's been a go-getter. But
have you, if I may ask, being that you have doing all this and you have the Facebook page and the numbers and everything, any viable leads since Chris went missing? Anything, an email or a phone call or anything that the police have gotten that they've been able to follow up on in the last 2.5 years that seem somewhat credible? Because, of course, as you might expect, we cover a lot of stories on Unfound where the leads are, nothing but lies or anything else, but anything
Right.
that's been believable that's come in.
Not really. About the closest to that, there were some remains found out near Odessa in October.
Mm-hmm.
And through a mix-up of a kit, our DNA wasn't in the system.
Mm.
My granddaughter and I both resubmitted ours, and the ranger called me March the 18th, telling me 100% that these remains were not Chris. But other than that, no, it's just been hearsay and gossip and somebody trying to get 15 minutes of fame. I mean, I've gotten ransom texts and phone calls that no person had to listen to.
Yeah.
But
the scam artists for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But
maybe I should ask
anyway.
you this, and this is not to be morbid, but I think that being that this has come up in a couple other disappearances that are similar to Chris's, did Chris own a gun? Any weapons or anything missing that he might have owned?
He had guns at home. I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure he had one with him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he and Harold have both always told me, if you ever come out here, do not come unarmed. Mm-hmm. Apparently, they carried their guns everywhere, so I'm saying, yes, Chris probably had a gun with him, but would Chris take his life? No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Right. Okay. I like I said, because it's Texas, and we know how many people in Texas love their guns, and that's fine. That's why I think of course, if it was California or Vermont or something, maybe I would feel, wouldn't think that would be a relevant question. But being that it's Texas, and being that the way you've explained, Chris, I thought he might be a gun owner. I'm a gun owner. That
I'm a gun owner.
Yeah. So is there a possibility that when he walked off that day that he would have had a gun with him?
From my gut and my heart, no.
Okay.
I really don't think so.
All right. So you don't think he had a gun on him when he left, when he walked?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, to me, he was upset. He was going for a walk and was going to come back.
Okay.
No, I mean, he wouldn't take. I just don't see him taking a gun.
Okay. I guess what I'm asking, aren't any guns missing? Of course, with Angela being around, who knows what she would do with any of Chris's stuff? Who knows? But people who I guess what I'm asking is people who know me well, and I've been a gun owner for over 4 years now. They know the kind of gun. I have a couple guns, but they know like the gun that I carry with me all the time. They know what it's a Glock 19 that I usually carry with me everywhere. Did Chris have a gun like that his friends would know that would be with him or something? Do you know that?
His friends may have known, but I mean, I don't.
Okay. All right.
I mean, Chris loved guns, so I mean, I'm not even sure how many he had.
Okay. Why don't you give out that Facebook, being that it was a couple minutes ago, why don't you give out that Facebook page name again, please?
Okay. It's What Happened to Chris Sanders, a.k.a. Dog, D-O-G-G.
Okay. How do you get that nickname?
Karen. His friend, or our friend Karen, they were cutting up one day, and he called her something, and she said, "You ain't nothing but a dog." And it stuck.
Okay, a dog with 2 G's, not 1 G, 2 G's.
Right.
Like Snoop Dogg. Okay.
2 G's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sandy, any last words before we complete this interview?
I just want to say thank you. And if anybody has any information, feel free to contact me or Karen or Edward.
Yeah. Me too.
Anything. I mean, we check out any lead or any tip we get our hopes up, and They've been dashed so far, but we're not going to give up until either until I have him home or until I know why.
Okay. Sandy, I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And that was my interview with Sandy Sanders, mother of Christopher Sanders. I thank her for joining me and all of you on the program. As I stated during the interview, there are now maps coinciding with Chris's disappearance on the Unfound website, theunfoundpodcast.com, the Unfound page, and in the Unfound discussion group on Facebook and on Instagram. I think they will help you better understand how things allegedly transpired that morning of August 13th, 2017. There is also now a video on the Unfound podcast channel on YouTube where I diagram how Chris walked off as well. I also offer some commentary on what the search parameters should be if groups are to look for him. One point before I go into the summation. Before this episode aired, a listener alerted me to a November 2019 obituary for Christopher Lynn Sanders, who lived in Texarkana, Texas. That Christopher is not the same person we are talking about on this program. The Chris Sanders in this episode has not been declared deceased. I had originally recorded a summation for this episode on approximately April 15th of 2020. Between then and the episode airing on April 17th, 2020, I came into possession, or I got to see, I should say, the information that was being used to show that Angela was allegedly in the area of Pecos, Monahans, that area on the day or days before Chris disappeared. And of course, in the interview, you heard Sandy and I talk about that. Now that I've seen the information, I'm here to tell you that that information is wrong. So no matter what you heard in that section of the interview regarding that, now that I've gotten to see the information, that information is wrong. And in fact, it is cell phone information that is being misinterpreted, which should not be a surprise because most people are not used to looking at cell phone information and trying to figure out where people are and everything else. Whereas, given that we've covered over 160, almost 170 disappearances, I, along with my assistants, have had a chance to look at cell phone records extensively. And the people who were looking at those cell phone records were coming to the wrong conclusions regarding it. And so I felt that even though I had already done a summation for the interview, I had to go back and record this section instead, because I do not want anybody to come away from an episode thinking something is true when it's not. And especially when there's been a mistake in the analyzing of the information. So for the record, on the record, just no matter what Sandy said in the interview and what she and I talked about, the records that allegedly show Angela being in that area are completely wrong. I'm not saying she wasn't. I don't know. But the information they were using to come to those conclusions does not show that. So, where does that leave us? Well, what sticks out to me is this. Harold, Chris's uncle, Cody's father, once he found out Chris had walked off, he drove up and down I-20 for several miles looking for Chris. Yet we know due to the phone call at 11:51 a.m. that Chris was seemingly alive. Somewhere. We just don't know where. And Harold was on I-20 around the same time that Chris answered the phone. What I'm saying is Chris was walking, but he wasn't doing it on I-20. Of course, This all presupposes we believe Matthew's story about Chris going over the fence. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Dentzel, and you've been listening to Unfound. I wanted to do a video for the disappearance of Christopher Sanders. I thought it might allow all of you to better visualize what we were trying to explain in the interview. I'm guessing many of you have already gone to Google Maps and Google Street View to try to look at it for yourself, but I thought this diagram might be helpful as well. We are looking, of course, at a Google satellite view of the RV park. This is where Christopher's trailer was, and it was down here on the corner. I'm using this pen to show it right here. Now I'm not saying that that is his trailer. I think that this is a satellite view from like 2019, well after he disappeared. However, you can go back if you have the Google Pro version, the actual downloadable map program, which I have, but I didn't want to use it for this. It's a little more complicated to use, but you can go back with the historical imagery to show what this RV park would have looked like in past years. But this is just regular, the Google Maps you would get to through google.com. But this parking spot right here was right here on the corner. That's what his mother Sandy said. This is where his trailer was. And then what she also said was that Matthews, it was the way she understood it, right next to it. So I took this to mean the one right to the east. So once again, that's north, that's south, that's west, that's east. So Christopher's trailer is here. Sandy says that she believes that Matthew's trailer, the guy who saw Chris walk off, his trailer was right here. And her understanding is most of, if not all of these trailers in this RV park have to do something with the oil drilling business in West Texas. I mean, if you look at it, if you do a street view, you're going to see it's very, 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 very plain. It's like a parking lot that was converted so these trailers could be here. As you can see, there's no trees and nothing else. Not what you usually think of, I guess, when you think of an RV park like for vacationers. It is believed, or I believe, that most of these trailers you see here are for people who are working in this area from out of town, once again, mainly in the oil drilling business. So Chris's trailer was right here. You can see I-20. You can see the blue and white lettering right here with the I-20 going west to east. And, excuse me, just hit the tripod. So what Matthew says he saw is that he saw Chris leave his trailer, go right here. There is a fence on the perimeter of this trailer park. Saw him go over the fence and walk out to I-20. Now, what's important to understand there is that there is no fence between what they call a frontage road, this West 21st Street, and I-20. Usually with frontage roads, there is a fence, but there is no fence. There's a fence like down here, but once we get to right here, there's no fence between this road and the interstate because there's an exit right here. So they have to stop the fence at some point. Well, they stopped it over here. So once Chris got over this fence, he had a clear walk right to the interstate. He didn't have to go over another fence to get to I-20. So you can see that here. You can't see that there's not a fence there, but you can go in Street View and do that. Maybe I can try to do that and just show you that right quick. So there's the RV park right here. This is the area where it was the Street View from. Not sure. It says June, down here it says June 2019, so almost 2 years after Chris disappeared. But there's this trailer right in the position where Chris's would have been. You can see this very tiny fence right here that anybody who is decent in decent physical condition could get over this fence. Here's this frontage road, also known as West 21st Street. And there's I-20 right there. Just walk right through the grass, right to I-20. Now, if you look way down here, there is a fence, and it stops right there between this street and the highway. So this is the fence that he would have jumped over. Now, what's a little confusing to me, just the first part that catches my attention, is that he didn't have to go over this fence. There was no reason that Chris, if he was intending to walk east, had to go over this fence. Why? Because there is an intersection. We'll go right down this direction. Keep going, and going, and going, and going. Right here, that's the edge of the RV park, and there's an intersection right here. So he didn't have to go over the fence. All you had to do is walk east to here and walk right out onto the road. And then onto the highway. So it's a little confusing. Let me go back to the Google view and I'll show you what I mean. So we were just at this intersection. So Matthew's saying he jumped over the fence, went onto I-20. Well, if he was going to go this direction, why bother even jumping over the fence? Why not just walk the whole way down here, going the direction he was seemingly going to go anyway, and just go right out through the intersection? Granted, I guess me being 49 years old, I would take the easy way out and just go to this intersection instead of trying to jump over the fence. So, I don't know. Maybe Chris was looking to avoid anybody else seeing him walking. Walking past any of these other trailers. Maybe his cousin Cody's trailer was down there. His Uncle Harold's was down there. I don't know. And I'm not sure Sandy knows. But Matthew says right by where the trailer is, he jumped over the fence and went out onto I-20. Now, what Matthew also says is that he was walking down I-20 East, and then he went up over the rise, and he disappeared. Well, what he means by that is there is this exit, and you know how a lot of times you're on a highway and you come to an exit and the highway rises because there's usually a road that goes over the highway, and that makes it easier to engineer it. So this is what I believe Matthew meant, that he was watching Chris walk away, and then he got up here, and that would be about, I'm going to say about 900 feet, maybe from the RV park to the rise up here. Not quite, quarter of a mile, 1,320 feet, so not even a quarter mile, I don't know how that all works out, like 1/5 of a mile or something. But, so not too far to see. And Chris just walked right up over this interchange, and that was the last that he saw of him. I'm not saying that didn't happen. In fact, looking at this diagram, it very well could have. Matthew's here, Chris is there, he goes out, Matthew's and the truck's there, it's blaring, remember the alarm was going off. And let me just maybe blow this up or zoom in just a little bit more. Matthew's over here somewhere. Chris is over here. Chris goes right out to the highway and starts walking this way, and Matthew's wondering, what the heck is going on with this guy? And there goes the highway, and it goes up over the interchange. Once again, there was a rise in it, and maybe I can show that using Street View. And you can see how it rises in the distance. Where it goes up. You can tell that it goes up, up, up. And then down the other side. Okay. So there you go. There's the on-ramp. So that, I think, is what... Let me zoom this back out. Yeah. So that is what we were trying to explain, what Sandy was explaining in... the interview. Now we have to get to the other part of this, and that is Matthew says that Chris left at 9:30. Cody called him at 11:51. That's 2 hours and 20 minutes later. Average person walks 3 miles to 4 miles an hour. Let's just go on the high side. Maybe not. Let's go on the low side. 3 miles an hour. So he was going 2 hours at least, so that's 6 miles. And then an additional 20 minutes. So 3 miles an hour is 1 mile every 20 minutes. So if we are to believe that Chris was walking that whole time, that means he would have been at least probably 7 miles away from where he started. Well, what does that mean? That means it's a lot of area to cover. Approximately here, let's just do it this way. Measure distance. So, here's Monahans. This right here is where the RV park approximately is. And we start going out here 7 miles. I mean, that's 5 miles right there. 6. That's 7 miles right there. 7 miles. That is a large, large area. So, anywhere in this area, and if we believe he's headed east, then anything, that would be the minimum distance, or, where somebody should be looking. In this area, it's all, like I said, around 7 miles. Let's see if I can, right in here, east. And you got Stand Hill State Park. I'm trying to keep this radius right here. I mean, as you can see, it's a huge area. Now, what are the pluses and minuses of this? Well, on the plus side, you can tell there aren't any forests or anything like that. No big wilderness where everybody, if you put a group together, you'd really have to be, get your saws out and everything else, or chainsaws, to work your way through some wilderness to try to track down where Chris might have gone, if we believe that he walked away and did not get picked up by anybody, anything like that. That's one of the positives. You can look at this, it's very barren. I mean, really, you look down at this and it almost looks like you're looking down on the moon. No offense to you West Texas residents, but it's very stark looking. A lot of grays and tans and whites. No green and no blue either. No water, not a lot of trees. So that would make, if somebody was going to do a search, at least a little bit easier. Now, on the negative side, it is a vast area, and we don't know what direction Christopher went. Being that Harold was out on I-20 and did not see him, it's perfectly reasonable to believe that Chris might have left the highway. Maybe he took one of these other side roads. You can see some other roads that are on there. Maybe he went over here and then went south or something. Or he, could have gone, over in this alternate 20, business 20. We just don't know. But if I were to start doing a search, it'd probably start around the 7-mile mark over here and out. That makes sense to me. That makes sense. Now, probably some of you right about now are probably thinking about the Crystal Morrison disappearance, which was resolved earlier this year. Her remains were found in December. They were identified at the beginning of this year, and it turned out that she had not strayed more than a quarter mile from where she was last seen. Now, what, of course, hampered search efforts was that there were trees and woods in the area. In addition, there was private property where the guy or woman did not allow them to go on the property to search back at the time when they were looking for Crystal, and that's what kept Herb from being found for all 7 years. And it was just luck that she was found. She was found by some guys doing some surveying for the state because they were going to be putting in widening a road or something. Now with this, although there are similarities, I think, to Crystal Morrison's disappearance in that it seems like she just walked away, and it seems that Chris did as well. I don't know if we have some of the other issues with Crystal being in bad health. There's no proof that Christopher was suffering from anything. But on the other hand, we don't know if he was keeping up on his bipolar medication, and I guess he had high blood pressure as well. I don't know how those things would have affected him had he not been taking them. I think that another point to think about is what Matthew was saying about, once again, if you believe Matthew, I get the feeling that there are going to be people who even doubt the story, and you're perfectly willing to do that. Don't be willing to do that. I'm not saying it makes total sense. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. But in a situation like this, it does seem strange that a guy would just stand there and let another guy walk off while the guy's truck's blaring and not say to the guy, what are you doing? Are you not going to shut that thing off and leave the door open? It just doesn't sound like your everyday occurrence out there. I think all of us, if we're by somebody and they leave their car door open, walk away from it, and the car alarm's going off, I'd be like, sir, ma'am, what are you doing? Matthew didn't do that for whatever reason. So I understand why there's going to be people that might say, I don't know, that story makes total sense. But if we were to believe Matthew, it does seem like Chris was in a little bit of a mood, going back and forth between, let me get rid of this, between his truck and his trailer before leaving. Now, what was he looking for? What was he doing? I don't know. Maybe some people might portray it as some sort of manic behavior, going back and forth, back and forth. And then, on top of everything else, leaving his truck door open, which he locked his trailer but left his truck door open. Interesting. So, but that's, is there anything else that I want to say about this? I guess I think that probably for also some of you that you may think of Tom Brown's disappearance, and eventually his remains being found 12 miles away. A lot of people do not believe, of course, that he walked that whole way. However, in this case, if we're to believe Matthew and we believe Cody, and Cody called him and it was 2 hours 20 minutes later and Christopher was still walking, he would be several miles away, just like Tom's remains ended up being several miles away, being found several miles away from his car. But I just wanted to do that for you, explain that a little bit. It sounds to me like not any searches were done. but I think they should be. It's going to be difficult. Who owns all this land out in this area, all these miles away? You're going to need a decent amount of people to do this, but being that it hasn't been done, somebody should at least think about it. It's been 2.5 years now, even more than that. But it's going to be a lot of area to cover. But if it were me, I would start to the east of town at the 7-mile mark and go out from there. So that was this video I wanted to do to make, maybe it'll help you better understand what we were trying to explain during the interview.